Over the weekend, I took a group of customers. I work with outdoor recreation, and I took a small group of customers up to the Wheeler Peak via Williams Lake Trail. We got up to the trailhead, hiked in 2 miles, and enjoyed Williams Lake. And on the way up, I remarked how there was snow. When we get to the trailhead, we could see snow in the mountains. Even when we got to Santa Fe, we could see snow in the mountains. But when we got to the trailhead, we could see snow embankments hidden in the trees. And as we got on the trail, we saw snow even closer to the trail. And eventually, in the 2 miles between the trailhead and Williams Lake, we found ourselves at a small patch of snow on the ground in the trail. I say all this because the Rocky Mountains are difficult, and I still feel pain in my shins. Today is Tuesday. I hiked from Williams Lake to the top of Wheeler Peak on Sunday. That was only 6 miles that day, though about 3,000 foot of elevation change. That was tough, but I'm a good hiker, but I'm not a long distance hiker. I don't have that kind of experience. But the author of today's book does. Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today I'm going to be discussing this book, The 1,000-Mile Summer. This is written by Colin Fletcher. I bought it at Coas. It cost $4 when I purchased it, and I think it was worth it. It says here, kind of in the back cover, $7.95 is what the person paid for this before it was given into the used book system. I probably would have paid $8 for this and enjoyed it and thought that it was well spent money. Colin Fletcher is the author of The Man Who Walked Through Time, which I've discussed on this channel before, and that is the author who was the first one to really create a trail from one end of the Grand Canyon National Park to the other, from a downstream end to an upstream end rather than a rim to rim trail. This book details a journey from before that Grand Canyon adventure. He walks on foot from a southern part of California to the northern part of California. And he does have a map here that shows where he went. It doesn't follow the Continental Divide Trail, but it is similar in a lot of ways. A major part of this is that it does not, the CDT does not follow the Colorado River, and Colin Fletcher did. And he talks about, in this book, the leg pains he had, the things he learned when he was wandering along the Colorado River and near a bunch of people's ranches out there and meeting people that wanted to be isolated and enjoy their life, kind of isolated, but at a slower pace than the rest of America. And he talks about how those people killed rattlesnakes on sight, and he describes fighting some rattlesnakes, but then he gets to Death Valley National Park and he meets a ranger who says, well, one, those rattlesnakes are just part of the environment, but also they're not hurting you. They're letting you know that they're there, but they're not going to strike you unless you try to hurt them. And sure enough, after that, he stops killing rattlesnakes because he grows and learns as he travels. An aspect of this book is also some of those interesting characters. One of the people, or rather, one of the families he meets early on in this is well, first he meets the daughter in the family. A girl of about 7 was towing a toy wagon in wild circles. In the wagon sat a young goat. The girl was sunburnt and blue-eyed and puckish. The goat was brown and semi-cooperative. And then he ends up meeting the owner of the ranch and the father of the girl. And the father says, "My wife tells me you're on a long hike," said the man. "I'm just a country boy, but we thought maybe you'd like to come back to the ranch and have supper with us and stay the night in the guest room. My name's Ira, and this is Terry." The three of us walked back together through the darkness. Just before we reached the ranch house, Terry unburdened her mind. "I think I will call him Brownie." Brownie, in this case, in reference to the goat. Ira was in his early 30s, Corinne a little younger. They had both been grained and thinned by the desert, tempered but not bent. Both had hung fiercely and proudly onto their grade school learning, and had built onto it a solid practical knowledge of the desert. Terry was learning too. She explained the habits of different lizards for me, and then recited the names of the commoner desert bushes and trees. "And Mommy says the flowers this year are the best I'll see for a long, long time." Her eyes grew round with wonder. "Maybe for 20 years. During supper, I asked about the plump frontier cattle I had seen back near Draper and 4S ranches. "Oh, those are ours," said Ira. "They'll run south for 30 miles easy. Mostly they stay close to the river, but when the rains are good, they range back 10 miles and more into the hills. They're devils to find then." "They're bad enough any time," said Corinne. "I can ride out with Ira whenever I can, and those cattle move through the bush as fast as a horse can after a hard day. It gets hot here in summer too, 110 degrees or more. But it's a good life, so long as you don't meet too many rattlers. Oh, you needn't worry, there aren't many about this early in the year. All we want is peace and quiet. Listen, while you're walking, would you keep an eye open for a place you think might suit us? Close by the river if possible, so's we could irrigate like we do here. There'd have to be some kind of water, of course, and nobody near," said Corinne. "Just a little place like this where we could be self-sufficient. It used to be quiet down here, but too many people have been coming in these last few years. Now there's all kinds of cabins up the river a little ways, and even a few down below." I mentioned the black cabin on its acre of bulldozed gravel. "Yeah, a guy's been trying for years to start up a fishing and hunting resort there. He's just about given up now, I think. Thank God. Still, it shows the way things are going, and it'll get worse. So don't forget, keep an eye open for a place you think we might like." Now, Ira and Corinne wanted to do what frontiersmen had always done when advancing civilization caught up with their homesteads. They wanted to push ahead once more and find freedom in the wide and untamed land that still lay ahead. Now, this is about a story from the 1950s and is copyright 1964. And if you think about Ira and Corinne, if they're close to 30 years old, they were Great Depression kids. And you think of that as not being so long ago. 100 years ago was before the Great Depression, and yet these people were living like Wild West settlers. They wanted to be further and further away from others. They had a little daughter, and they were raising her what in a way they felt was right, and the parents only had grade school educations, and the daughter, it never says what her education level ends up being, but they're a nice family. And Colin Fletcher meets this family. He meets, the ranger and his wife at Death Valley. He meets a lot of people on his journey, and it's a long walk. He meets a lot of people. He hikes some really tall mountains, and eventually he gets to Oregon, which is the end of his hike. And I think about myself, I'm a overweight man, a tall guy, and I have strong shins, but after the ascent from Williams Lake to Wheeler Peak, which was only 2 miles up and 2 miles back down, my legs are shot. Like, I cannot emphasize enough. I usually do 2 miles, maybe three if I'm feeling like I have enough time on a treadmill before work. And I haven't been able to get on that treadmill because of the pain in my legs for the last couple days. It just is very difficult to push myself in that way. And this guy walked thousands of miles during a summer. I think the map shows the timeline as being from, here it is, March 8th to September 8th. So about 6 months of travel. I've always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail. Well, I've always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail. And at least in the mid-Atlantic area, Pennsylvania, Northern Virginia, that's what it's called, the Appalachian Mountains, rather than the Appalachian Mountains. That's more of a southern accent in there. But I've always wanted to do that, and I know it takes 6 months out of your time. But on the other hand, I also want to do something like what Colin Fletcher did, which is not follow those established trails. And the Appalachian Trail is very well established, and it is on a part of North America that is very well developed. There isn't much room east-west for me to travel along a ridgeline and stay on mostly public land that allows me to travel there. So on some level, I admire this guy for being able to do as much as he did. And on another, I envy him because he had a career that allowed him to take off 6 months. And I would like to take 6 months off and just explore New Mexico, explore Colorado, and just be a desert rat. But I don't have that kind of courage. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have that kind of career that allows me to do that. Colin Fletcher in 1958 did, and that's almost 70 years ago. It is impressive the kind of things this guy wrote about. And when he later did the hike that became The Man Who Walked Through Time, it's just an impressive story. There's a book or two behind me, I don't know on which shelves, about a guy that walked through the Pacific Crest Trail, and that was relatively recently, an older guy, and he talks about his difficulties, including damaging his spine. He fell down a mountain, slipping on some ice, and he ended up having to kind of skip the Sierras for the most part in California because of the bad winter that year. And I'll discuss that book eventually, but what I mean is some people are still doing those grand adventures and those long-term hikes. One of my favorite movies is Trek, which is, I say movies, I mean documentaries, but Trek is a documentary about four young men that set out to hike the Appalachian Trail in 2001, and only three of them did it in full. One of them ended up getting injured, having been hit by a car and having a broken leg. But they're young. They're just out of college. They're not even starting their full-time careers yet. Colin Fletcher has that full-time career. He has friends and family, and he still finds the courage, the money, and the time to do these grand adventures. And that's what I really appreciate about it. So I do these interesting hikes. I do this interesting travel for my work, but none of it even pales in comparison to what I aspire to do. And I wish I could live like Colin Fletcher does in these books. So, yeah. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.